Didn't see you there. Hi, I'm Pablo Jones 100. And I'm starting to read this book called Series of Unfortunate Events, The Bad Beginning. All of one book in the 13-book series, A Series of Unfortunate Events, by Lemony Snicket. And this is the first book, where it begins as The Bad Beginning. Out of the 13-book series, this one is the skinniest, and also the funniest, as I will not only be reading the book aloud to you, I will be singing the book aloud to you. Sit back, relax, and enjoy. The Bad Beginning. To Beatrice, darling, dearest, dead. I will also be showing you the illustrations as they are done by the great illustrator. I really don't care. I will look for him. Brett Hellquist. He's probably dead. No, he's not dead. I'm kidding. He's not dead. To Beatrice, blah. At first we see, obviously, the Baudelaire children being in a trolley, being dragged away from, looks like a gigantic mansion thing that's smoking with a little leopard right there. And it looks like the fire station's there. It looks like a little hose got loose. And just these illustrations are very nice. There's a little gargoyle who looks like a little ferret. Got a mine there. It looks like these little kids are riding away from this burning down gigantic building with these little fire people who have the little mustaches. And so it begins. Chapter 1. If you are interested in stories with happy endings, you would be better off reading some other book. In this book, not only is there no happy ending, there is no happy beginning, and very few happy things in the middle. This is because not very many happy things happened in the lives of the three Baudelaire youngsters who was on the illustration, I'm guessing. Just so you know, I've never read this series before, so if I start laughing a lot, it's because I'm laughing at myself, and you should do the same. Violet, Klaus, and Sonny Baudelaire were very intelligent children, and they're charming, resourceful, and had pleasant facial features. But they were extremely unlucky, and most everything that happened to them was rifled with fortune, misery, and despair. I'm sorry to tell you this, but that is how the story goes. Page 2. Their misfortune began on day at Briny Beach. The three Baudelaire children lived with their parents in an enormous mansion at the heart of a dirty and busy city, and occasionally their parents gave them permission to take a rickety trolley. The word rickety, you probably know, here comes from the word unsteady or likely to collapse. Alone to the seashore, where they would spend the day as a sort of vacation, as long as they were home for dinner. This particular morning, it was gray and cloudy, which didn't bother the Baudelaire youngsters one bit. When it was hot and sunny, Briny Beach was crowded with tourists, and it wasn't possible to find a good place to lay on one's blanket. On gray and cloudy days, the Baudelaires had the beach to themselves, which they liked because they lacked socialness. Violet Baudelaire, the eldest, liked to skip rocks. She seemed very bright. Like most 14-year-olds, she was right-handed, so the rock skipped farther across the murky water when Violet used her right hand than when she used her left. As she skipped rocks, she was looking at the horizon and thinking about an invention she wanted to build. Anyone who knew Violet well could tell she was thinking hard, because her long hair was tied up in a ribbon to keep it out of her eyes. Violet had a real knack for inventing and building strange devices, so her brain was often filled with images of pulleys, levers, and gears, and she never wanted to be distracted by something as trivial as her hair. She should just shave it off, then that'll make your problem better instead of wasting little pink things. This morning, she was thinking about how to construct a device that could retrieve a rock after you've skipped it into the ocean. If you'd ever watched the Peanuts special where Snoopy runs away, it takes like 10,000 years or something for it to go back onto the ocean, so this would be saving the world sometime. Klaus Baudelaire, the middle child and the only boy, liked to examine creatures in tide pools. He seemed very bright as well. Klaus was a little older than 12 and wore glasses, which made him look intelligent. He should just get contacts. He was intelligent. The Baudelaire parents had an enormous library in their mansion, a room filled with thousands of books on nearly every single subject. Being only 12, Klaus, of course, had not read all the books in the Baudelaire library, but he had read a great many of them and had retained a lot of information from his readings. He knew how to tell an alligator from a crocodile. He knew who killed Julius Caesar, and he knew much about the tiny slimy animals found at Briny Beach, which he was examining now. You'd think that Briny Beach wouldn't have little animals. It's really briny. Sonny Baudelaire, the youngest, liked to bite things, yum yum, and was an infant and very small for her age, scarcely larger than a boot. What she lacked in size, however, she made up with the size and sharpness of her 4 teeth. Sonny was at an age where one mostly speaks in a series of unintelligible shrieks, except when she used a few actual words in her vocabulary, like bottle, mommy, and bite. Most people had trouble understanding what it was that Sonny was saying. For instance, this morning when she was saying gack over and over, which probably meant, look at that mysterious figure emerging from that fog. Sure enough, in the distance, along the misty shore of Briny Beach, there could be seen a tall figure striding toward the Baudelaire children. Sonny had already been staring and shrieking at the figure for some time. When Klaus looked up from the spiny crab he was examining very closely, and he saw it too. He reached over and touched Violet in her arm, bringing her out of her inventing thoughts. Look at that, Klaus said, and pointed toward the figure. You know what? I'm just going to sing their voices in a different voice, because look at that. Doesn't sound very nice. So get used to that. It was drawing closer, and the children could see a few details. Yeah. It was about the size of Eddie's, except his head was tall and rather square. What do you think it is? Violet asked. I don't know, Klaus said, squinting at it. But it seems to be moving right toward us. We're alone on Briny Beach, Violet said a little nervously. There's nobody else. It could be moving toward us. Wow. Oh, there's nobody else who could be moving toward. You see, I haven't read the book. She felt the slender, smooth stone in her left hand, which is kind of messed up because she was a righty, which she had been about to try to skip as far as she could. She had a sudden thought of how to throw at the figure, because it seemed so frightening. These kids don't get out much. It only seems scary, Klaus said, as if he read her and his sister's thoughts. because of all the mist. That was true. As the figure reached them, the children saw with the relief that it was not anybody frightening at all, but somebody they knew, Mr. Poe. Mr. Poe was a friend of Mr. and Mrs. Baudelaire's, whom the children had met many times at dinner parties. One of the things Violet, Klaus, and Sunny really liked about their parents was that they didn't send their children away when they had company over, but allowed them to join the adults at the dinner table and participate in the conversation as long as they helped clear the table. The children remembered Mr. Poe because he always had a cold and was constantly excusing himself from the table to have a fit of coughing in the next room. No pun intended. Mr. Poe took off his top hat, which is kind of old school, which had made his head look large and square in the fog, and stood for a moment, coughing loudly into a white handkerchief. Violet and Klaus moved toward to shake his hand and to say, "How do you do?" "How do you do?" Violet said. "How do you do?" Klaus said. "How do you go?" said Sunny. "Fine, thank you," said Mr. Poe, but he looked very sad. For a few seconds, nobody said anything, and then the children wondered what Mr. Poe was doing here on Briny Beach, when he should have been at the bank in the city where he worked. He was not dressed for the beach. I picture him being really fat, so I wouldn't want to see him dressed for the beach. "It's a nice day," Violet said finally, making conversation. Sunny made a noise that sounded like an angry bird. Sure. And Klaus picked up her and held her. "Yes, it is a nice day," Mr. Poe said absently, staring out at the empty beach. "I'm afraid I have some very bad news for you children." The three Baudelaire siblings looked at him. Violet, with some embarrassment, felt the stone in her left hand and was glad she had not thrown it at Mr. Poe. Da-na-na. "Your parents," Mr. Poe said, "have perished in a terrible fire." The children did not say anything. "They've perished," Mr. Poe said, "in a fire that destroyed the entire house. I'm very, 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 very sorry to tell you this, my dears." Violet took her eyes off Mr. Poe and stared out at the ocean, because the ocean looked nicer than Mr. Poe. Mr. Poe had never called the Baudelaire children my dears before. Mr. Poe, Mr. Poe, Mr. Poe, Poe, Poe. She understood the words he was saying, but thought he must be joking, playing a terrible joke on her and the brother and sister. "Perished," Mr. Poe said, "means killed. What a jerk." "We know what the word perished means," said Klaus crossly. He didn't know what the word perished meant, but he was still having trouble understanding exactly what that Mr. Poe has been said this whole time. It seemed to him that Mr. Poe must somehow have misspoken. "The fire department arrived, of course," Mr. Poe said, "but they were too late. The entire house was engulfed in fire. It burned to the ground." Klaus pictured all the books in the library exploding and going up in flames. Now he never read all of them, and you're not gonna get to. Mr. Poe coughed several times into his handkerchief before continuing. "I was sent to retrieve you here and to take you into my home. where you'll stay for some time while we figure things out. I am the executor of your parents' estate. That means I will be handling their enormous fortune and figuring out where you children will go. When Violet comes of age, the fortune will be yours, but the bank will take charge of it until you're old enough. In this economy, I would just take the money and run. Although he said he was the executor of their Pokemon. Violet felt like Mr. Poe was the hard word. Executioner! Brain fart. He had simply walked down the beach to them and changed their lives forever. Come with me, Mr. Poe said, and held out his hand in order to take it. Violet had to drop the stone she was holding. Klaus took Violet's other hand, and Sunny took Klaus on the other hand, and in that manner the three Baudelaire children, the Baudelaire orphans now, I never knew Sunny could talk, were led away from the beach and from their previous lives. It's an awkward note. Well, hope you liked the first chapter of A Series of Unfortunate Events, Book 1, The Bad Beginning by Lemony Snicket. Don't forget to comment, rate, and subscribe for more videos. I'm going to go stare at some pigeons. Yeah.